My name is David Gregory. I am a market business advisor for the China-Britain Business Council. And I'm very pleased to welcome our guests and our speakers to a webinar entitled Managing Quality in the China Supply Chain. I think a lot of you on the call will know who the China-Britain Business Council are already, but for those who don't, we are the leading business membership organization helping UK companies to succeed in China. A lot of what we do is to provide practical support services, and I will touch on these at the end of the session. So just back to the subject for this morning, obviously quality and managing it is of continuing and constant interest, given the importance of China in the global supply chain, but perhaps even more focus on it now since the COVID situation has highlighted how critical it is for supply chains to run smoothly and efficiently. So this morning we've brought together 3 of our member companies with relevant expertise to talk about the different aspects of this. What we've included is talking about standards, accreditation and testing. Just before we go further, please note that your microphones will be muted, but you can use the Q&A box to submit questions at any time to be referred to the panel later on in the session. So time is pretty tight, so let me come to our first presenter, Ryan Junyu, who is the Director for Product Certification Services with the British Standards Institution, covering the Asia-Pacific region, which obviously includes Greater China. In this role, Ryan takes the leadership for British Standard Product Certification Services across the entire region, providing support to companies and organizations for their management system improvement, for products, for services, and compliance with legislative standards and market requirements. So, Ryan, please walk us through an overview of standards and application.
Thank you, David. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Sorry, I think the okay. So thanks for CBBC's invitation for this webinar. I think it is a very good topic. David's mentioned how to manage the quality in the China supply chain. And my sharing today is very focused on the overview of standard and application perspective. My name is Ryan, as David introduced, and I work for BSI, and I'm responsible for the product set of services in APAC. So basically, before I start, I think this is probably the beginning where we start. Why should a product should be certified? And basically, when we're talking about the demands, if we're doing the international trading, that the demands of the product certification or quality come from 2 demands. One of them is called legal requirements, which is a must to do. And the second is we call that market practices or the procurement requirement. It's basically from the society or basically from procurement requirement by the buyer, by the end user who want the quality demonstration, they can feel safe to use the product. And this is not a mandatory requirement. This is usually a voluntary or recommended certification program. Let me take a little bit example so you can understand. So first is you probably be very familiar with a British style plug. When usually when you can travel all over the world, you put a plug on a socket. You can find out there's lots of different kind of plugs that usually you're going to buy a adapter to that. So a British type plug is very widely used and basically on UK, and sometimes it's been used and adopted in other markets as well. So the example is talking about how to get a British style plugs exporting to the UK market, and probably give you a little bit clue of the certification program. First, again, you can see the demands come from the left side of the screen. It comes from a plug and socket regulation, which was published in 1994. So this documentation requires every detail of what kind of safety requirements and what should a safe plug look like to be used in the UK. So if we look into a little bit details in this regulation, the regulation requires a standard plug shall be of a type approval by a notified body. I will introduce later what is a notified body. And the plugs of the type should confirm with a specific standard, which in this regulation, which is the British standard 1363. And the purpose is to ensure the normal production and design of the plug will result in a plug that type of conforming to the standard. If a plug conform with the standard, if a plug in compliance with the standard, which means this plug is safe to use. All right. So you can see a BSI, a British standard, on the screen as well. So that this is usually a standard we're talking about, and a notified body is usually BSI is one of them, and one of our guests in the later who will present his speech, Satra, is a difficult another notified body for helping you to comply with the regulation. And another example is about I will give is a gas water heater exporting to the EU market. Very similar with the practices exercises in the UK, that the EU requires a very similar thing with a regulation. I know there's a lot of you probably been familiar with a mark called CE marking, which was resulted from this regulation. So I don't want to repeat every details, but the same clue, the same logic is that the regulation requires the product to be safe and then to be compliant with the standards. Then everyone can feel okay. I'm fine. I'm being safe with my products to be to be used in my home or in my workplace. Okay, so as you can see that besides of the regulations, it's very critical to use.
Brian, sorry, we can't actually see your slide's still showing the first slide of the presentation. All
right. What about now?
Yep, now we can. Yep, sorry about that.
Okay, let me change to. So Chris, do you want me to go back to my second slide?
No, we just couldn't see the changes that you were making, but now we can.
All right, okay. So let me put in the presentation model. So Chris, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see the presentation mode.
You can see it now?
Yeah.
All right, but let me move it. So can you see the change?
Yes, yep, thank you.
All right, okay. Sorry for the technical issues. So besides of the regulations, it's very critical to use the correct product standards, because sometimes it's very confusing because a lot of standards being published for a lot of products. So the right product standards is always been recommended for demonstrating the relevant compliance of the product to the relevant essential safety requirements to a regulation. Otherwise, there's a big mistake in the certification scheme. So you can find all the details on the EU harmonized standard website, or you can log on the British government website, find a designated standard, or you can ask a BSI to support you. I'll try again about the slides. So just make sure you can see the move of the slides. Can you? Okay, just move around. So introduce a little bit ABCs, the very fundamentals of the standards. Just by the way, say, Chris, can you see my updated slides now? Hello, Chris.
Yes, can see them, Ryan.
Okay, just to confirm. So the standards. So there's a lot of kinds of standards. So the most familiar one will probably be the ISO one, the ISO 9000 and the ISO 50000. Those are the international adopted standards. But at the other tiers of standards, there are regional standards like the standards used in the EU, we call the EN standards, or the national standards, or the BS standards. The DIN standard is the standard in Germany. The AFNO, which is the standard in national standard for France and Australia standards, and the GB standard. This is not Great Britain, but this is the China national standard. And also I know some companies, they're using their own standards, so-called enterprise standards, to make sure they follow the right procedure or the requirements. So it's there's a logic that some of the national standards or regional standards been upgraded or be used or be recognized as ISO standard. So you will find a lot of the ISO, BS, EN standards, which you can see is that those are the examples I just gave. Okay. So the national standards could be developed by the national standard bodies or reference the international standard and regional standards. On the screen, you can find, sometimes you find the BS standard, and sometimes you find the BSE and ISO standard, as I mentioned. That's the example I gave. And most of the time, those standards are identical, which means the standard can be used in Europe, in the UK, or in the worldwide. So standards could be identical, but sometimes we should be very careful. So identical means the main provision of standards are the same, but that's usually some of the an annex requires national standards, which to comply with some special national conditions, for example, in the UK. So just make sure, because some countries have different kind of safety requirements or of configurations on some specific products. So to give you a little bit clue of why we always, when we are using standards, just always remind yourself that using the most updated standard. The most updated standard, you will find a year close to the standard number. So that's the year, the updated year of the standard. Why we require that? Because usually we update with the industrial committee, with a technical committee. We review the standards to be adopted to the most technology being used on that product. So there's some changes on the standard requirement very frequently. So you can in this time zone you can find out this standard, the EN 60335, being updated very frequently. So just always remind yourself to use the right standard. At the same time, to always use the right updated standard for your product. And only only the valid version and the most updated version can be used for testing and certification. Otherwise, it's not a valid certification. And besides the regulation, the product standards, it's very critical to use the correct certification body, a notified body, for carrying out the assessment for conformity. Take a BSI, for example. BSI is the assessment body for the UK market. After after the Brexit, you will find out the UK CA and the UK NI requirements, which I will introduce in the later slide. And for the EU market, the BSI is the notified body to certify a product for CE marking. The UKCA, just quickly to mention that, because I've been sharing with them the standard, sharing with our clients globally about this change as well. So after Brexit, the UKCA marking comes to in force officially from the 1st of January 2021, which is this year. And from 2021, only UKCA recognized for the market access to the Great Britain. But because allowed all the manufacturers to have the time to transfer from the current CE marking to UKCA, during 2021, the product can be marked with either CE or UKCA or both as a transit time. But as I mentioned, that from 2022, the CE marking is no longer recognized for the market access to the Great Britain. All right, so you probably will ask, okay, after Brexit, is that a lot of changes between the regulations? What should I do? How can I change my, is there some technical requirements to change on my product? The good news is not that much, because as we look into the regulations, taking radio equipment, for example, the regulation, I think just a lot of them just change the names or the terms. For example, in the European term, it's called notified body. It's now been replaced by a term called approved body in the UK for UKCA marking. I will not go through all the details. That I believe you will receive a copy of my slide after this session. But at the end of the day, please always be, I think this should be always considered as a risk by manufacturers and monitor as part of your reviews of your product. Because when you put your marking on your products, please use the required word by the regulation to make sure there's no issues where you put the product on the marketplace. Okay, so a little bit commercial. BSI is not only the organization for standard, but the UKCA, IBA, and the GSN's accredited conformity assessment body to carry out the assessment for certifications. What we're doing, we have a quite large scope come across with life protection, which is the PPE and the fire protection products, energy, construction, digital and connected products. And we can support you to get access to the global market. Like the kite market can help you to enter market in the UK and the Middle East, and CE marking for the EU market, and the ENEC marking for the EU market, and of course the UKC and the UKNI marking for the UK market, the Great Britain market, and the UK market after the Brexit. And we can also support you to entering the Australian and New Zealand market via our benchmark program and AGS, which is for the gas appliances program. And we can also do the GMark, EQM, the ECAS marking for the Middle East market. Right, so there's a couple of our clients just share in China that are using the BSI services, just for reference, but not all of them could be shared on my slide today. I'm sorry for that. So as David mentioned about this, I don't think it is only about the one-way introduction about the products exporting to the UK. But same as if you are entering the China market, if you want to put a product on the China market, there's a similar certification or regulation system in place in China. It looks a little bit complicated, but not that much, because if you look at the right side of these slides, this is the standard administration committee. which they have two kinds of standards. The first is the GB standards I mentioned in the early slides, that we call the China National Standard. This is mandatory. And the second type is recommended. You will find a dash and with a letter T on the standard number, the name, which means that this is recommended standards to use, but this is not mandatory. And sometimes the government encourage the industrial or the companies using their own standards to make sure they comply with their quality and safety. You can find the information on my slide. On the certification scheme and administration, there's a national body called CNCA. They are the government body for certification and accreditation administration of PRC. So they demonstrate or they specify all the certification requirements for your products. So it's a little bit complicated, but I think the most thing I want you to remember is there's a compulsory certification program called the CCC. You can find a little CCC certification mark on my screen. This is something you must do for your product on the China market. Not every product should be compliant with the CCC marking. So you can find out a clue what kind of the scope of the products. The most of that as the most risk products or the electrical or electronic products to sell. So and CNAS, which is the China National Accreditation Service for Conformity Assessments, they monitors over the activities of the certification bodies and the testing laboratories. What they are doing, do they comply with the ISO standards to following up and to carrying out the certification activities or the testing activities to comply with the standard. Okay, so that's my most, that's what I want to share today. I know quite a lot of the information. Sorry for that. There are some accreditation information and testing information. I believe our guests today from Satra and Sari, they will introduce more details in the later slides. Thank you. So back to you, David.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan, for that. Yeah, Ryan, that was a very interesting presentation. I have to say, very comprehensive. There is just a lot of information in the field, and there's no way of getting around that. I think the couple of points that struck me immediately in your opening remarks is that when people talk about standards, there's quite often a misunderstanding, and you made the point that certain standards are legal and mandatory. Others are generally what is followed in market practice, and I think it's very important for people to understand that at the outset, both of which are equally important. So anyway, moving on. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Sari Leno, who is the ISO Technical and Compliance Director for both the UK and international markets for ACM CCAS Limited, who are a leading UCAS accredited certification body based in the UK, but with over 280 auditors based internationally, working with thousands of clients, literally thousands of clients in over 20 countries, including, of course, China. Sari is responsible for overseeing planning and development and management of the UK and international compliance of the ACM accredited management system, certification schemes, which are covering, amongst others, ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. So Sari, please let me hand over to you to talk to us about accreditation and certification.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. As David introduced, my name is Sari. I'm Technical and Compliance Director at ACM CCAS, which is UCAS accredited certification body. And I'm also auditor for ISO 9000 and ISO 27001. I'm going to talk about accreditation and certification today. And as Ryan mentioned, there are mandatory and voluntary certifications, and management system certification is voluntary one. So before we start to talk about accreditation and certification, I think it's important to understand the terminology, what is meant by these words. So what is accreditation? In general terms, accreditation is the formal recognition that an organization is competent to perform specific activities in a reliable, credible, and accurate manner. In the case of management system accreditation, the accreditation bodies are assessing certification bodies against the ISO IEC 17021-1, which provides requirements for bodies providing audit and certification of management systems. So that's accreditation bodies are not auditing certification bodies against the ISO 9001, for example, but as a result of this assessment, certification bodies are gaining the kind of license to audit those management system of their clients. So in the UK, UCAS is a national accreditation body which is appointed by government. And as I mentioned, in many countries, accreditation is not mandatory. So you will come across unaccredited certification bodies. What is then certification? So certification is a demonstration that what is being supplied actually meets the requirements specified or claimed. So in the product certification, it would be that you are meeting the standard, the product is meeting the standard. But in the management system, normally the management system standard are providing the requirements, and then the company's own management system is audited against those requirements and check that they are meeting them. So then what is then accredited certification? So that is accredited certification is provided by accredited certification body against the specified management system standard, for example, ISO 9001. So the company who is gaining the ISO 9001 certification is not accredited. They are certified by accredited certification body. And I think that's important distinction because people often refer that they are accredited to ISO 9001. Okay, so certification bodies are monitored and assessed by accreditation bodies. So who is then monitoring the accreditation bodies? This is done through the peer evaluation, and there is an umbrella organization called International Accreditation Forum, IAF, and they are managing this peer evaluation, which ensures that accreditation body members only accredit bodies that are competent to do the work they undertake and are not subject to conflict of interest. So impartiality is an important part of the certification. IAF is also providing the mutual recognition arrangements between its accreditation body members. So if you go to the IAF website, it's iaf.nu, you will find the MLA members, and those are accreditation bodies in different countries. So you will find UCAS there, which is the UK one, and you will also find the Chinese accreditation body. So how this all fit together then? So for example, in the UK, UCAS is a member IAF, and UCAS accredits certification bodies like us, ACM, CCAS, the management system standards according to ISO IAC 17021. And this allows then us as an accredited certification body to certify clients to the management system standards. And our customers then, as I mentioned earlier, gain that certificate which is accredited by accredited certification body. When a certification body applies accreditation, it's not just against the standard. So each standard have divided to industry codes, and you may get accreditation to ISO 9001, and then you have a different industry areas, for example, construction. So you need to separately apply to that construction industry area. And that's why getting the accreditation is quite time consuming and expensive because, for example, in ISO 9001 is divided to 39 different industry codes. That is the reason that sometimes you come across accredited certification body which is not able to give you accredited certificate because they don't have that specific code accredited. So normally, like us, we follow exactly the same process if we would issue the unaccredited one. So the checks are there, and you can trust that it's good certificate, but it's just missing that UCAS logo. What are then benefits of accredited certification? IAF's goal is certified ones accepted everywhere. And that's why they have created this mutual recognition, which goal is to reduce the trade barriers. So any MLA member who is certifying in any country, those certificates should be accepted across the different countries. Other benefits may include the reduced regulatory body audits, as the certification gives confidence that products and services that organization delivers meets the standards. Certification is also competition edge, so it provides market differentiation and proof that an organization complies with best practices. ISO has created the website, which link is on the slide, which gives some examples how the certification can deliver positive benefits. So there are quite a lot of different businesses who have gained the management system certification. Regarding the ISO management system standard, as Ryan mentioned, there are different management system standards, but ISO is probably the biggest one for the management system standards. There used to be PS OSAS 18001 for health and safety. It's still valid in the end of September. But as some of you know, it has transferred to ISO also. So by the end of September, all those old OSAS 18001 certificates should have been transferred to ISO 45001. So ISO is an independent, non-governmental international organization, and it has 165 national standard body members, and it's writing most of the standards. What management system standards are bringing, or management system as overall, what benefits it brings to the companies? It can bring improved operational efficiency because you're defining your processes and streamlining the process throughout the company. Provides framework for decision making and risk management, and it can also boost the bottom line of your business. Some management system standards. These are the top 3 according to ISO 2019 survey. Survey is based on the accredited certification body responses. So like ACM CICAS is receiving the inquiry from ISO survey around April time. And it's voluntary to reply. So that's why this is just an indication, the actual numbers worldwide. This is also Chinese numbers from certification in China for the management system. Again,
Sorry, can you unmute yourself? That's better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can. And your slides, I don't think your slides have moved. They've stopped on the ISO management system standard. I think you're talking about something else now.
Okay.
You're talking about numbers in China.
Can you see now?
Still not moved.
Still not moved. Okay. Let me check. Let me stop sharing and start again. Any better?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, technical difficulties. So yes, what I was going to say is TIC market. It means testing, inspection, and certification market. And I probably already said that the certification segment is only 10% of this total value. I already mentioned, and also Ryan mentioned, that China has own accreditation for the China National Accreditation Service for Conformity Assessment, CNAS. And CNAS is a member of IAF. Therefore, CNAS accredited certificate are recognized worldwide. However, UCAS is highly valued in Chinese market. And there are quite a few certification bodies who are operating in the Chinese market, providing UCAS accredited certificates. For example, ACM CICAS, we have UCAS, we have agent in China who is working locally. The arrangement is that they are finding clients, arranging the audits, but all the decision making and reviewing is done in the UK. So you are in essence receiving the UCAS accredited certificate from the UK. And Chinese market for management systems are very fast, and things are changing quickly. So our SLAs are quite tight for approval of the client. We need to get it done in 1 day, certification within 3 days. So the competition is high because of the number of national and international certification bodies in the Chinese market. So that's about me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sari, for, I think, explaining what can be quite a convoluted subject quite clearly. I think that, I mean, there's a lot of comments that you made that I think were of interest. I think you mentioned about the fact that ISO 9001 isn't just one size fits all. It's actually split into 30+ industries, which I think is probably an interesting piece of information for a lot of people may not be aware of that. And I think the last comments you made, which are particularly interested to anybody who's worked in China, is that once Chinese companies decide they want to do something, they want it like yesterday. So
Yes.
time pressure is on. So thanks for that. So now, last but not least, we have Simon Courtney, who is the divisional manager for the personal protective equipment, PPE, a term we're all familiar with now, for Satra technology. And Simon is responsible for the testing and certification of PPE equipment. He's an old hand. He joined Satra in 1995 and has been involved with a wide range of testing, test method development and technical training, as he is in fact the chair of several national, European and international standardization committees for PPE and regularly contributes to the design and review of PPE performance standards and testing methods. So, Simon, please tell us all about it.
Right, thank you very much, David. I shall just share my screen, so bear with me. So thank you for that very kind introduction. My session this morning is about testing. But we could also approach it as it's actually about standards. So Sari and Ryan have referred to the standards that underpin the certification and the auditing processes. And I'm going to try and dissect them a little bit and try to understand what is the testing and what can it be, and where do those numbers that we work to come from. So I think it's always very healthy to stop and think about what the word testing means and what does it mean to our industries where we're working with organizations who are trying to produce product and then sell the product on. So what is testing? Well, it can be a measurement. It can be a number of something. It can be how long something is, how heavy something is. And that's a raw number. It can be a function to check something it can be a check that something is functioning correctly. So thinking about my world currently in PPE, does the piece of PPE work like it's meant to? Does the glove, as we fasten it onto the hand, does the fastening work? So it's quite a simple yes, no sort of criteria on that. It could also be a check to check and make sure something is, to see if there's something present. So I'm very much thinking of chemicals really with this. So we use the phrase innocuousness to refer to the assessment or that a product does not introduce extra risks. So as I'm wearing my glove, as I'm carrying out an activity, am I being exposed to any chemicals that I might ingest through my hand? And this check would be to make sure any restricted substances weren't present in that product. It could also be a check to make sure that something is working under certain conditions. So we have our product that is supplied and it goes out into the real world. The real world has some very complex conditions. So it could be very cold, it could be very wet, it could be very hot. So we could be looking to see how that product works within those conditions that are likely to be exposed to. It could also be a measure of how long a product lasts. So the product we've made, we plan to supply, do we expect it to last a matter of days? Or could it last for several years? And this really is a special type of testing to see how long that is likely to be. And I guess the last thing is a confirmation that the properties meet set requirements. And this is really where we come into standards, because the standards referred to have requirements for the different properties. So the testing will verify whether these properties are met or they fail to meet them. And all the standards out in the world, there's so many of them, so it's always worth thinking about these standards. And Ryan has mentioned a few of these, and there's very much a hierarchy of standards, really. When looking to test and to certify a product, we definitely look to see where on the hierarchy of standards these testing methods are available to us. So at the top, we have the ISO methods, which are international, so they have such a wide reach. We have the European standards, which are heavily used within the certification process within PPE, but in other areas. And then we have national standards. So I've referred to the British standards here, but we have other national standards across all other countries, and including the China standards. So the national bodies controlling and building these standards themselves. We can also have industry standards. So the PAS standards used in the UK are created by industry, and they're put together in the place of a more formal standard. And then organisations like Satra, we're a notified body and a test house, and we build our own test methods. So we tend to do this when we see that there is a gap in the provision by all these other standard bodies, and we will build something that is appropriate. And then there could be in-house standards created by manufacturers. So these can be very quick quality checks. I've worked with a number of organisations who have built very rudimentary systems into their manufacturing units so that they can do quick quality checks. And while they don't have the same level of quality control that my testing does, because they understand that correlation, I think they perfectly meet those needs. So it's another set of standards that are available. And lastly, on this slide, I'll refer to state-of-the-art testing. So under the certification processes, quite often the legislation refers to state-of-the-art testing. So really trying to find the most up-to-date and sophisticated procedures to be able to carry out that work. So the hierarchy of standards, we really try when we want to make the standards as universal as possible, is try to go as high up this hierarchy as possible. And really, it stands to reason anything accepted by the international community is going to be more recognised by more companies, more countries, and more industries. Now, I've used the words testing method of testing and used the word standard. So it's worth exploring what the difference between a test method and a performance standard is. So a test method is really only the instructions of how to carry out a test. So it'll be detailed, it'll tell you what the test is applicable to, what the equipment you use is, how you carry out the test, and how you generate that number. At the end, the result generates, the result is generated, but there's no judging of that number against any standards, any requirements. And this is where a standard comes in. The standard may contain full instructions to the test carried out as the test method, but it will also contain the requirements. So that's where you can pass or fail the result, or you can give it a level. So some standards might have a number of levels which you can assign to these results. So between the two, the testing method does not have those requirements, and the performance standard does have those requirements. And those requirements are really crucial when you are looking for certification, because you need to pass and fail. You need to understand whether that product is meeting those levels that that have been deemed appropriate for that product and that end use. A testing method, you cannot pass a testing method. The method is just the means of generating that number. So thinking about a test method or a standard, how do they come into existence? Well, they're usually created by a committee of experts. So I myself sit on standards at the European and international level. So it brings together standards experts, product experts, testing experts from around a region, and it'll be a consensus of opinion, bringing together all the ideas of these people and all the people they represent. The standard must contain all the information necessary to carry out a test. So if somebody picks that standard up, they're able to acquire the equipment or even build the equipment necessary to carry out that test. They must be controllable and repeatable. So it's no good, a test method is no good if each time I carry out the test, I get a very different result on the same materials. So we need to be able to control to the finite detail that is appropriate to the end use and make that repeatable. It must contain all the details of the equipment, as I previously mentioned, and it also must have define how the result is calculated. So some test methods may give a description. For example, the wear of a product may be a descriptive result, or it may be a calculated result. And some calculations can be quite complex. And it must define the unit of the result. So obviously a description has no units because it is words in nature. But if you're generating a number, then we need to define what are those results. And I guess it's always worth thinking about what testing is and what testing isn't. Testing cannot represent every real world situation, every condition in this very complex world that we exist in. Testing bodies and testing experts are very sophisticated. We are able to build those very complex analysis which get us very close to real life situations. But it probably means that the testing is very, very complex, very in-depth and very lengthy. And that really makes it very, very expensive. So for most test methods, cost effectiveness is really important because we need the test standard to be engaged with and accepted. If, for example, with a very simple pair of gloves, the cut resistance test at the moment is under £200 to carry out. It is only one blade under one condition with new products. But if you were to create a very complex set of tests that represented all these other scenarios, then you might be looking at hundreds of thousands of pounds. So the approach has to be very cost effective. And test methods may be very simple or very complex, depending on their nature, depending on what they are trying to test for and what product they are testing for. But even a very complex test may be using very complex equipment. It should still be cost effective for the product. So Satra, we are a test house and a notified body. We have our own testing facilities in China, so we have some good experience of managing a laboratory and our competition in China. And I guess the key thing is to say testing can be carried out anywhere in the world. And testing in China is great for Satra because we can test closer to manufacturing sources, and it means we can control the quality of laboratories because we own these. But we're able to offer a China package, a cost which represents local values, and it means that it might be cheaper to test at source. Our office is staffed by people from the UK and local staff, so we have some excellent contacts within the office who can speak to the customers, and they can carry out communications in the local languages, so which is fantastic because they can handle translations, and it's sometimes easier than myself communicating with our customers. Submission to the local testing is at lower costs, so you've not got the same costs of bringing the product right the way over to the UK. It's obviously much cheaper to post within China. And the laboratories are also accredited by ISO 17002, by UCAS to 17025. So this is the standard for laboratories. So we know everything that's being carried out is at the same standards with anywhere else in the world. And the laboratories are supported by the UK's knowledge and experience. So I'm regularly on calls with China and the staff in China to help support them with new products they may not have seen before, with new standards they undertake, and really sort of underpin everything they do with all the knowledge we have collectively across our company. And in our case, we're working in kind of coordination with the notified body as well. So there is sort of seamless services where they're accessed in China. And while I've spoken about Satra here, this is true of any organisation that has its operations in China and in the UK. All these positive reasons for using those offices for companies working in China translate out across to those other organisations as well. So talking about my specific area, so the PPE area, the testing that is carried out in China is in support of the European and the UK certification marks, and it is carried out in accordance with the recognised testing standards. So we'll be able to judge results generated in China to the results generated in America, in the UK, anywhere the same standards are being used. The Satra staff are very much involved with the standardisation process. So we are helping build those standards, and I'm sure in future years we'll get more of our Chinese staff involved with this standardisation process. And the standardisation process means that the standards are continually being formally reviewed. So the standards are checked to make sure that they are still up to date, whether changes in technology, changes in products mean that these have to move forward. And we undertake a very valuable approach to the jobs, where we try to cross-reference products. So, for example, a lining material may be used not just in one product the customer sends in, but in 10. So we will try to cross-reference to try to reduce down the amount of testing that is needed. And we also make sure that we give early communication. So some of these testing programs or testing methods have very, very detailed approaches, might take weeks to carry out. They might be part of a bigger program. And I think the important thing is that to help the customer, then communication should happen as soon as we see failures. So we can pause, or we can start testing programs which might run into high costs should they carry on to conclusion. And it does allow the work with the customer to be able to resolve any challenges. And then there can be, on top of all the recognised standards that we carry out, we can also carry out claim verification testing. So if you are building a product with a specific claim, which is being made through your marketing material and your packaging, you know, a unique selling point for the product, then we can help put together programs to actually verify that. So should the customer be challenged, they can give all the information which supports the language they're using when communicating those claims. So testing of standards is a very complex area, and to be honest, I could keep you for hours talking through this, and this is very much an overview of what we do. But should anybody want any more information, then you can make contact with me through this email address, and I'd be more than happy to pick up conversations from there. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found some of that interesting. I shall hand back over to David.
Thank you very much, Simon, again, for summarising what is quite a difficult subject into condensing into 15 to 20 minutes. I think it's probably important just to note that Satra, ACM, CCAS, and BSI, all UK companies, but with physical and strong presences in China, and I'm guessing not just looking at products which are being produced to be exported to the UK, but also products which are being perhaps sourced in China to supply to UK companies based in China and working there. So that resource is at hand for everybody to take advantage of. Thank you to all our presenters for what is a very comprehensive overview of some of the key elements involved in controlling quality. We have the opportunity now. Time, I have to say, we've run a bit further on than we should have done, but we have some time to take some questions if we have any. Chris, do we have any questions coming in? I can't see anything here on my screen. If we don't have any from our listeners at the moment, I've got a couple that I'm quite interested to put. I think, Simon, just carrying on from where you left off, obviously you've been involved in the testing field for quite a long time, and obviously closely involved with your operation in China. How do you see the progress or development of testing in China? Do you see this something which is going to increase, people are going to become more aware of? Has it reached a plateau? What's your thoughts on that?
I think definitely increase. I think it's quite straightforward. I think there's real benefit in having testing close to source. I mean, some of the benefits are that the language can be communicated in local languages. But I also find with some testing, with more complex products and even with development, it's great to be able to be at the test house, you know, book a testing slot, work alongside the technologists and explore where the results might be. And that's not possible if I'm on the other side of the world. You know, within country, it's so much easier to do. So I just think it's going to increase more and more. And all the time we're looking what else to put into our China office, what else would support the industries out on that side of the world.
And is the demand coming from your UK clients, or is there also, shall we say, an increasing awareness from Chinese suppliers that this is something that is a good thing to get to do and it has to be done?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I only in the last week I've been looking at our the customers who've been using our China office, and I'd say while yes, I've got the Western companies names, the vast majority of customer are from within China. But that may be driven by the Western brands, though, or the Western organisations. What you tend to find is that the testing is pushed down the supply chain to the manufacturers. So it may be driven through the relationships with Satra in the West, but actually the testing itself is accessed by the organisations in China.
Okay, it's interesting. Thanks, Simon. Ryan, I've got one for you, and it's a bit of a broad question, really. So it's a bit of a toughie to pose you with, but you showed us a slide giving a sort of overview of how the standard structure fits together in China. You know, you included things about CCC, about the GB and GB/T standards. Is it broadly the same as we see in the UK of these organisations fitting together, or are there any real major differences between the way that China manages its own standards and the UK, for example, manage ours?
I think very fundamentally, I find there are some similarities between each other. As I put in my slides, that because in the UK there's the regulation drives the product to comply with the standards. In circumstances that those kind of standards could be granted as the mandatory standards, because this is regulation-driven ones. But at the same time, there are some products that's not compulsory to be certified. So a lot of the companies will have their own requirements to demonstrate their safety and the quality, and there's their levels. That's the mandatory. Sorry, that's the voluntary standard. So in that kind of, if we put that between comparing to the China model, I think it's very similar between each other.
So if it's a question of companies producing, UK companies, for example, with operations producing for China, it's simply a matter of getting assistance to understand what, as you say, is required, what is mandatory, what perhaps as we would term as perhaps code of practice or desirable or market practice that also needs to be taken care of, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Okay, and just following on from the question I put to Simon, do you think amongst Chinese companies, and not even internationally, but Chinese companies producing for the domestic market, do you think that they are becoming more, shall we say, in tune with the necessity for management systems and meeting specific standards?
I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, it's a short answer, but I would tend to agree. Okay. Sari, I'll just wrap up with the question for you. And again, it's a bit of a broad brush question, but in China specifically, can you give us a description of what a typical client is who comes to you for certification and why?
We tend to have the small to medium-sized businesses in China, and I think there are two types of customers. Either they are new customers, so they have just implemented the management system, and they're looking for the certification body, and they get certified first time. Then you have transfers, so they are already certified by accredited certification body, but whatever reason they're looking to transfer. And there is a IAF mandatory guidance how you do the transfer, so it's done civilized manner.
Right.
So,
okay.
So those are the main categories, but the size of the companies, they varies from one-man band to bigger clients.
Okay. Just one other question coming in here, and I think we'll have to wrap it up with this one, but thanks for that, sorry. This is a question saying this company is struggling to find auditing bodies on mainland China who have experience with factory production control audits to support a certification process undertaken with a UK approved body. I open this to anybody. Is anybody familiar with factory production control audits within the certification process?
What standard are they looking for?
That I don't know. Perhaps this will be easier. I would be happy to introduce this company to you all after the call, and perhaps we deal with it that way. Would that be a sensible idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So that brings us to, we sort of say time is pressing. So I think that means we have to wrap up our question and answer session. As I say, that specific point that came in there, for the person who sent that in, I will connect you with the speakers and perhaps they can give you some more specific information. So yeah, thanks very much, everybody on the panel there. I mentioned at the opening that I would touch on some examples of some of the services that the China-Britain Business Council offers. So if I can just walk you through that, Chris, if you can bring us to there, thank you very much. And I will keep this brief. So first of all, we have a service called Gateway, which basically is designed to deliver one-off projects undertaken by our own sector teams in China. Very common examples of this would be market research, perhaps partner identification projects, looking at partners for not just sales, but also relevant to our conversation this morning, sourcing products. But also, as you can see from the right-hand side, we get in other projects, for instance, executive recruitment, event management, and the like. Next, please. We then have Navigator. This differs from Gateway in that this is basically a flexible retainer service, again, engaging our own sector specialists, but for specific periods. So, for example, it might be 3 days a month for 4 months, and is well suited to companies who require a presence on the ground to deliver specific things. So it might be, for instance, might be involved in liaison with a local company. It might be a little bit of business development work. Could be anything similar to that. And finally, please, Chris, we have Launchpad. Now, this is a very popular service for UK companies who want to put a full-time person or persons on the ground in China, perhaps in a business development role, for example, but do not have the need or requirement at that time to set up their own entity. So essentially, CBBC host an employee on that company's behalf, working out of one of our offices, and CBBC take care of all the regulatory, payroll, finance, and HR matters. So that's quite a popular program. We probably have about 65 project managers working for the companies up and down the country at any one time. Last slide, please, Chris. So that was just a very brief sample of the services that CBBC offers. So I think this sort of brings us to the end of our session for today. Hopefully, those of you who were listening in gained some insights and knowledge from our expert speakers, who thank you very much indeed, Simon, Ryan, and Sarah, for your time today and your input. And just leave me to wish everybody a good day. If you need to get in touch with me, my details are there. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.